It's time for yet another card reveal, and today I've got a gold Havenfaller from the upcoming Edge of Paradise mini expansion. This card is going to need a lot of prayers in more ways than one. Take a look at Impious Bishop. He's a 6 playpoint 4/5 with Last Words restore 3 to your leader, and a Fanfare Last Words to summon another Impious Bishop. The main draw is his Crystallize 2 Countdown 3 effect that summons an Impious Bishop and reduces its countdown by 2 if you have more evolution points than the opponent. Visually, Impious Bishop has an interesting design. He really gives off vibes of a certain cathedral-dwelling pontiff. Sadly, like many an estranged gamer in 2022, he looks clean, but his gameplay leaves something to be desired. On the surface, Impious Bishop seems like it supports every Haven archetype at once, since it's a crystallized follower with Ward and Healing. Although Impious Bishop does a lot of things, it's very strange the way it tries to synergize with Haven archetypes, and I don't think it does so particularly well. A 2 playpoint countdown 3 amulet for a 4/5 ward is not impressive. There's a very similar card that already exists in rotation, and that's Featherfolk Windcaller. It's the same stat line, it also heals for 3, and the countdown is similar. The crucial difference is that Featherfolk only costs 1 playpoint. Impious Bishop has the payoff of a 1 playpoint amulet, but with twice the cost. This doesn't inspire much confidence, especially since 1 playpoint amulets inherently have a lot of value in an amulet deck, which Impious Bishop simply can't match. What's supposed to carry Impious Bishop is the Fanfare -2 to countdown on turn 4 going second. That sounds helpful, but only having that clause in particular makes the card really impractical. Ominous Tyrant is good to play on curve since its countdown reduction is passive and not tied to Fanfare. Clearly, Impious Bishop is not meant to be used like Tyrant, and ideally you can use cards like God's Loving Smite and Twinblade Featherfolk to pop it, but it seems like a lot of specific draw order for not a lot of reward. Let's take a step back and talk about countdown cards in Shadowverse. Countdown inherently gives a card a narrow range of use cases because cards that don't have any immediate impact are generally going to be harder to play into a developed board and game state compared to cards that do. In other words, countdown cards can very easily fall into the category of being useful when drawn at a specific time and utterly unplayable otherwise. Obviously, there have still been good countdown cards in recent times, so there are a few ways to circumvent this weakness. 1. The countdown can be short, and the amulet itself very cheap, so it's not very committal. Bonus points if the effect is simple and generically useful, like Luna's Doll. 2. The card could have synergy with power cards like Frigg or Selena, such that being a countdown amulet is a boon in itself. Or 3. It could be highly impactful when played as a body, like Vertex Colony. At this moment, with the current card pool, Impious Bishop is on track to have none of these things. I'll go into each point from the bottom up. It should be no surprise that a 4/5 ward that comes back once and essentially doesn't do anything else is not amazing. For comparison, 6 playpoint Chaotic Doom only sees very niche use when Shadow is struggling with their hand. Impious Bishop falls far below that line. The current rotation card pool does not have the power cards to support mediocre amulets. Selena rotated out some time ago, and Jadelin is already on his way out the door next month. Personally, I'd rather see countdown amulets that are straight up functional on their own, like Ominous Tyrant or Vertex Colony, but failing that, having something like Selena to validate their existence is pretty much necessary. Now, with that being said, my biggest issue with Impious Bishop is that its bonus countdown reduction is only part of a fanfare. It's a 2 playpoint Crystallize, which is fine, but the opportunity cost is completely out of whack considering the card is a raw countdown 3 unless you play it on a very specific turn. Impious Bishop is straight up underpowered on any turn other than turn 4 going second. There's a reason why I've been so fixated on turn 4 in particular. It's because decks that rely on countdown amulets usually struggle to save evolution points. You sacrifice tempo to play amulets, and generally you want to time your countdowns such that they all pop for the strongest possible swing. Evolving is often necessary to recoup that tempo loss, and to make sure your board swing is as strong as possible, since you are usually putting a lot of eggs into that basket. If you have amulets that clear the board like Agent of the Gods, you can save and evolve on turn 5 going first. Even if you do that though, it's still too impractical to be ahead in evolution points going first, just for an upside that still requires other cards to matter. It's hard enough to make use of Impious Bishop's countdown reduction in a vacuum, but if your opponent is actively playing around it, it only gets worse. Since Angel's Blessing will remain prevalent for its entire stay in rotation, it's already a major upside for decks to restore or save evolution points. Buff Dragon can evolve every turn without spending points, Spell Boost has Magi, and Shadow does Shadow things. Having free counterplay against Impious Bishop simply as a collateral is just rubbing salt on the wound. Impious Bishop could have been good in a different time period. I don't know what the other Haven card is, nor do I know what the next expansion will bring, but based on what we currently have in rotation, there is just no discernible reason to play Impious Bishop. With the way its countdown reduction is implemented, it's a card that only wants to be played in the most specific of circumstances. The payoff, cost, and countdown balancing is really peculiar, even compared to amulets we already have that don't see play without Selena. Impious is ultimately a card that Haven might be forced to play without any better alternatives if they receive the right type of power card, like the Second Coming of Selena or Holy Sanctuary. But until then, Impious Bishop just seems very counterintuitive, and it doesn't offer anything to the decks it was made for.